I never thought my own sister would use her wedding day to remind me why I stopped coming home. There I was, third row from the back at the Crystal Ballroom in downtown Denver, wearing a navy dress I'd rented from a shop on Colfax that smelled like mothballs and broken promises. My son Mason sat beside me, 7 years old and proud as hell in his first real suit, the one that cost me 3 shifts at the diner and a sleepless night hemming the pants myself. He kept tugging at the collar, grinning every time the string quartet started up, thinking this whole production meant we were finally part of something bigger than our 2-bedroom apartment and Saturday morning cartoons. He didn't know yet that some families keep score, that in the Holloway family, love was always conditional, and I had defaulted years ago. Charlotte, my little sister, though you'd never know it by how she commanded every room, floated down the aisle like Colorado royalty. 29 years old, MBA from Duke, marrying a venture capitalist who looked like he'd been grown in a lab for exactly this purpose. Our mother, Diane, had been planning this wedding since Charlotte's sophomore year of college. I got announcements. Charlotte got committees. I should have known better than to hope. But Mason had begged to see Aunt Lottie's princess dress, and some pathetic part of me still wanted to believe that time and motherhood had softened the edges of our family's cruelty. That maybe, just maybe, they'd look at my son, his gap-toothed smile, the way he said please and thank you to every server, and see that I'd built something good despite everything. The ceremony was beautiful if you like that sort of thing. Mason fidgeted through the vows but squeezed my hand when they kissed. "They look happy, Mom," he whispered, and I nodded because he deserved to believe in happy endings, even if I didn't. Then came the reception. We were seated at table 12, back by the kitchen doors where the waitstaff bustled in and out with trays of salmon and resentment. Diane had arranged the seating chart. She'd also arranged for my name to be spelled Allison on the place card, an old trick, pretending I was so unimportant she couldn't be bothered to get it right. I'd been Alyssa to her since I got pregnant at 23 with a man who disappeared before the second trimester. Before that, I'd been her daughter. After, I became her warning story. Mason didn't notice. He was too busy marveling at the ice sculpture, a swan that cost more than my monthly rent. "It's melting," he observed, which felt like a metaphor I was too tired to unpack. The speeches started after the salad course. Charlotte's maid of honor, some sorority sister named Brittany, gave the usual fluff about friendship, light laughter, easy applause. Then Charlotte stood up, her Vera Wang gown catching the light like armor. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, voice pitched for performance. "This means everything to me, to us." She looked at her new husband, Derek, who smiled the practiced smile of a man who'd already calculated the tax benefits of marriage. She pivoted toward the crowd, scanning until her eyes landed on me. I sat up straighter, smiled the polite smile I'd perfected over a decade of family holidays where I was the designated disappointment. "And I have to say something about my big sister Alyssa." Mason kicked his legs under the table, excited. "She's talking about you, Mom. She's been such an inspiration," Charlotte continued, that honeyed tone I'd learned to distrust. "Single mom, working class hero, doing it all alone because nobody else wanted the job." The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. The sound hit my chest like a physical thing. All those throats opening in unison, releasing the tension of a boring speech with the relief of sanctioned cruelty. I felt the blood leave my face, then rush back in a hot wave that made my ears ring. Mason stopped kicking. He looked up at me, confused. "Why is that funny?" I couldn't answer. My mouth had gone dry, my hands frozen around the cloth napkin in my lap, gripping it so hard my knuckles ached. Charlotte wasn't done. She raised her glass higher, basking in the attention. "I mean it though. It takes a special kind of strength to raise a kid when you're, what's the word, unclaimed? Like lost luggage at the airport but still functioning." More laughter, louder now. At the head table, Diane cackled and leaned toward her bridge club friends. "Used goods," she added, not even trying to lower her voice. "But she cleans up nice for a Tuesday." The room erupted, the kind of laughter that has edges, that draws blood without breaking skin. I looked around for someone, anyone, who might meet my eyes with something other than amusement or pity. My Uncle Roy studied his steak. My cousin Melissa checked her phone. Even my father's brother, who'd once slipped me $20 at graduation with a wink, stared hard at his water glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. Mason's small hand found my sleeve. "Mom?" His voice cracked. "Why are they laughing at you?" I wanted to stand up, wanted to scream that I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 7 years, that I'd taught Mason to read using library books because we couldn't afford preschool, that I'd gone without dinner so he could have new shoes for school. I wanted to tell them that being alone didn't make me used, didn't make me broken, didn't make me theirs to mock. But my legs wouldn't move. My throat had closed around words I'd swallowed so many times they'd scarred the tissue. Then a chair scraped back. Not mine. The sound came from the head table, sharp and decisive. Derek stood up slowly, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate care. He didn't look at Charlotte, didn't look at Diane or the confused guests or the photographer who was still snapping pictures of what he apparently thought was a heartwarming moment. He looked at me, and in his face I saw something I hadn't expected. Not pity, not embarrassment, but a cold, quiet fury that made the room go still. "Derek?" Charlotte's smile faltered. "Honey, sit down. I'm not done." "Yes," he said, his voice carrying without the microphone. "You are." He walked around the table. Past the cake that cost $5,000. Past the floral arrangements that probably required their own zip code. He stopped at table 12, looking down at Mason with an expression so gentle it made my chest ache. "Hey buddy," he said softly. "You okay?" Mason nodded, uncertain. Derek turned to face the room. "I've known this family for 2 years," he said, and his voice had changed. Still quiet, but carrying the authority of someone who didn't need volume to command attention. "I've heard a lot about loyalty, about tradition, about what it means to be a Holloway." He let the name hang in the air like smoke. "But I just watched a woman get humiliated for working hard, for loving her kid, for showing up to support her sister despite every reason not to. And I watched a room full of people laugh about it." He turned to Charlotte. "You called her unwanted. You made her son listen to it. That's not a joke, that's not a toast, that's cruelty, and I won't be part of a family that thinks that's entertainment." Charlotte's face had gone the color of the table linens. "Derek, it was just what? Just funny? Just tradition?" He shook his head. "I grew up with parents who thought tearing people down was how you showed love. I spent years in therapy unlearning that. I'm not spending my marriage relearning it." He looked back at me, and for a moment, I saw the cost of what he was doing. The wedding deposits, the merged social circles, the life he'd planned dissolving in real time. "Alyssa," he said, "you don't deserve this. You never did." Then he walked out, not dramatically, not slamming doors, just turned and left through the service entrance, past the melting ice swan and into the Denver night, leaving behind a silence so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. The room didn't know what to do. The laughter had died in their throats, turned to something sour and undigested. Diane stood up, sputtering about ungrateful men and ruined receptions, but her voice lacked its usual bite. People were looking at their phones, at each other, anywhere but at me. Mason tugged my hand. "Mom, can we go home?" I stood up. My legs worked now. My hands had stopped shaking. I looked at Charlotte, still frozen at the head table with her perfect hair and her ruined fairy tale. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a profound, exhausted relief. "Yeah, baby," I said. "We're going home." We walked out through the main entrance, past the photographer who lowered his camera as we passed, past the guests who suddenly found their shoes fascinating. No one stopped us, no one apologized, but no one laughed either. In the parking garage, Mason asked if we could get burgers and fries. I said yes because I didn't have words for what had just happened, because French fries seemed like the right response to a small apocalypse. He fell asleep in the car with ketchup on his chin, and I sat in our apartment parking lot for 10 minutes with the engine running, crying in a way I hadn't since I was 23 and terrified. The video went viral by morning. Someone had posted Derek's speech, just 2 minutes of a man choosing decency over convenience, and by Wednesday it had 3 million views. The comments ranged from "marry him instead" to "this is what allyship looks like," to hundreds of single mothers sharing their own Table 12 stories. Charlotte called once, left a voicemail about misunderstandings and wedding stress. I deleted it. Diane sent a text saying I'd poisoned another relationship and should consider therapy. I left it on read. Derek sent flowers. Wildflowers, not the hothouse roses from the wedding. No note, just a card with one word, "sorry." I didn't need him to be sorry. I needed him to have existed in that moment, to have shown Mason that sometimes people stand up, that silence isn't the only option. That meant more than any apology. The wedding was canceled by Friday. Charlotte moved to Boston, started posting inspirational quotes about toxic positivity and cutting out negativity, which I suppose was one way to describe what happened. We haven't spoken in 8 months. Mason still asks about Derek sometimes, calls him the night guy. He doesn't understand the details, but he understands the shape of it. Someone choosing to be brave when it costs something. I still work doubles at the diner. Still sew patches into Mason's jeans. Still make pancakes on Saturdays while he tells me I'm his superhero. None of that changed. But I stopped shrinking, stopped apologizing for taking up space. When Diane called last month to tell me Charlotte was engaged again, to someone appropriate this time, I said good for her and hung up before the lecture could start. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end with distance, with the quiet triumph of choosing yourself over their approval. I didn't get a speech, I didn't get a viral moment or a standing ovation. I got to walk out of that ballroom with my son's hand in mine, my head up, and the certain knowledge that I was never the joke they pretended I was. That's enough. That's more than enough.